Good morning. Welcome to the Dallas Independent School District STEM Environmental Education Center for our virtual field trip. We want to say a special welcome this morning to Young Men's Leadership Academy. Okay, it won't change.
Push it again. Click the mouse. No. There you go.
If you have not registered, we'd like for you to register. Please go to www.tiny.cc/EEC register and sign up for the program. This morning, we're going to do a program called Maintaining Balance in Response to Internal Stimuli. During this virtual field trip, students will discover that living organisms must be able to maintain balance in stable internal conditions in response to internal stimuli. Students will investigate responses in organisms that may result from internal stimuli. Ms. Nash will cover wilting in plants. Ms. Fuller will tell us all about fever and vomiting. Ms. Ramirez will cover hunger and thirst. And Mr. Broughton will tell us about fatigue and pain. During this field trip, if you have any questions, you would go to www.tinyEEC.EEC. Let me start over, I'm sorry. www.tiny.cc/EEC /question/answer. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Ms. Nash is going to tell us about wilting in plants.
Hello, welcome to my classroom. And we may have all seen plants wilting. Here in Texas, we see it all the time because plants wilt when they're not getting enough water. This is their response to a lack of water. So the roots take the water up, pump it up to the stem and out to the leaves. If the leaves don't have enough water, they will begin to droop. So I told this plant that I would be watering it today because it's looking sad. It's telling me, help, I'm thirsty, help me. So what's happening? So the cell of the plant, like the small one here, there's a big thing inside called the vacuole, and it's basically filled with water. And if there's not enough water, it collapses. And when it collapses, the cells of the leaf wilt. Now, you can run a little experiment with a test like I did. Okay, you see the results here, the final results. So I have two different plants, different kinds of plants, and this is today's sad plant. But let's see how it progressed, how quickly they wilted. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'll show you how it went. So I chose two different kinds of plants because plants wilt at different rates, and that rate of wilting depends basically on the leaf itself. So this one is pretty shiny one there. It's called peperonia, or they call it a baby rubber tree. It's a popular house plant, shiny green white leaves, and the leaves are waxy. If you feel them, they're thick and kind of smooth and waxy. They're native to tropical regions of Central and South America, and you can't leave them outside. They're a house plant. They'll die in the cold. The other one I chose is called the Coleus, and these are a popular house plant also. And they have really thin, kind of soft leaves. They come in really unusual colors. They're native to Southeast Asia and Malaysia. So I took two cuttings from each plant, the same length, on December 8th. And one I put in water and one no water. It's our first day. They're looking pretty happy about that. But the next day, the Coleus are starting to wilt. The peperonia, on the other hand, was just fine. Day 3, the Coleus is even more wilted. The pepperoni still looks pretty good. I forgot to take a picture on Friday. Then came the weekend, so this is day 7. The Coleus is extremely wilted, and even the pepperoni is beginning to droop a little bit. Both of the ones in water look just fine. They're still taking up water to that stem. Day 8, even more wilting, probably not, can't recover at this point. The pepperoni is drooping more too. And then finally, you can compare the two. Notice that the pepperoni itself is drooping, just drooping, but the Coleus looks just pathetic, all rolled up. So we're going to think about what explains the differences in these two reactions. Okay, so basically it's because of the leaf itself. And you can run your own, so thick leaf will tend to conserve water more. Now here's something kind of amazing. A nopal, a prickly pear, okay, pad. So I cut this thing off months ago, and look at it. It's not wilted, is it? Because guess what? It's not a leaf. Okay? So cactus got rid of their leaves because they dry out. This is a stem, and it just doesn't wilt. It will eventually dry out, but I don't know how long. We'll see how long it takes. A long, long time. But you can, I went around my yard, and this time of year, we just have mainly evergreens still with leaves, but even those have a lot of variation. So this one, okay, I can pick it, and it's kind of smooth leaves, but they're thin. And so the one, I just started this yesterday, and already the one without water is wilting. Here's another one. Again, kind of a little waxy leaf. Okay, the underside is interesting. It's fuzzy, and that's going to help keep it from drying out as quickly. Okay. And then last is a holly, and has really thick leaves, and there's basically no difference in the two, okay, between the one in water and the one not. So it's easy to set up your own little test run here. Okay, so I have, and you just need soda bottle, okay, some kind, a water bottle of some kind, and a 6-pack, okay, works really well. I can have 3 of each, three of each, okay, to make comparisons. I have one side with no water, one side with water, and then I can take notes, take pictures like I did with the experiment I ran, and look at some differences. And what you'll find is that the leaf itself matters a lot. So some plants tend to need more water and others don't. A lot of plants will wilt, like here in Texas during the day, they'll wilt and they'll come back at night. So they probably may or may not actually need more water. They just were stressed, water stress. Okay. So it's interesting to observe, okay. And then you can give your poor plant who's asking for water, some water. I'm going to water this one today. So if you have any questions, you can ask Dr. Gorman, and he'll be glad to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Nash. We did have a question, and it is what is another reason that might cause plants to wilt. And the plant wilts when, if this is concerning potted plants, the plant wilts when the roots crowd out the soil, and the soil cannot hold enough water for the plant. To prevent this wilting, about every 3 or 4 months when you're going indoor potted plants, repot them in a larger pot. Thank you very much. Now we're going to hear from Ms. Fuller about an interesting subject called vomiting and fever.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gorman. I'm going to start talking about fever and what it is and why we do it. And fever is controlled by the hypothalamus, which is a part of your brain. It's at the very bottom of your brain. And as you know, mammals and birds are both warm-blooded, and we're able to control the temperature of our bodies. And so that's where it's controlled. That's sort of like our thermostat, the hypothalamus. Well, when bacterium or viruses enter our bodies, they release a substance called pyrogen, Pyrogen, and that is taken to the hypothalamus, and it tells the hypothalamus that the body's too cold, and so it tries to warm us up. Now, the average adult temperature is 98.6, and we can range a degree lower or higher than that without being without running a fever. But if it gets to 100.4 in an adult, that's when you're going to say that yes, you're running a fever. And the function of the fever is a reflection of the body's defenses going into higher gear. So in other words, your immune system is gearing up to fight off a virus or a bacterium. And some parts of the immune system simply work better at a higher temperature. And this strengthens the resistance to infection and increases your odds of survival. So in other words, this is something that has evolved over the millions of years for us to be able to survive an onslaught by bacteria and viruses. Now, it does two basic things. It speeds up the functioning of cells, including the ones that fight illness, but a high temperature also makes it more difficult for a bacterium or a virus to stay alive in our bodies. So it serves a function, and fever does a good job, but you don't want too high of a fever because then that can do bad things to you. It can damage your brain cells. It can cause seizures, convulsions, a loss of consciousness. It can ruin your eyes and your teeth, especially if you're a baby. Babies, if they run a high fever, especially if they run a high fever for a while, it can cause severe brain damage, eye damage, teeth damage. It can kill them. So that when a child is really, really young, parents really need to keep a close eye on the degree of fever if a child runs one. Now, a lot of times kids want to know, well, what's the highest temperature? What's the highest temperature anybody has ever had? Well, you know, the Guinness Book of World Records keeps records on everything, and they have a record on a man from Atlanta. His name was Willie Jones, and he got heat exhaustion. Now, Mr. Broughton is going to talk about heat exhaustion in a few minutes, so I'm not going to say too much about that. But he ran a fever of 115. That's what it was when he was admitted to the emergency room. And he stayed in the hospital 24 days. They were able to get it down, and he did survive. But that is a remarkable event. Most people do not run temperatures over 106, and if they do, they usually do not survive. So fever is good for us in that it kills viruses and bacteria and helps our immune system go on high alert, but you don't want a high fever because it can severely damage you. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about the thing that Dr. Gorman made reference to a minute ago, vomiting. Now, everybody has thrown up. Babies throw up. Babies throw up usually because they drink too much milk and they get engorged, and then it just comes right back out again. But what purpose does vomiting serve? I mean, like, why? Why do we vomit, and how do we vomit? I mean, these are all things that are on our mind. The science word for it is emesis, E-M-E-S-I-S, fancy word for throwing up. So how does it happen? So simultaneously with a lowering of the diaphragm, there is a convulsion of the abdominal muscles. And whatever the contents of the stomach are, there are two exit points. One is the esophagus where the food came in originally, and then there's a pyloric valve at the bottom of the stomach that is the thing that releases the contents once it's been churned, had some chemical and mechanical churning, it goes through the pyloric valve. Well, the pyloric valve is very, very tight. So when this contraction of the abdominal muscles happens, it doesn't go out the pyloric valve. The esophagus, the tube up to the mouth is much more open. And that's the reason why when this happens, everything comes out your mouth. And of course it tastes horrible and it feels gross on your teeth and everything. Now, why do we vomit? What are the things? Well, it's just like fever. It's not a disease, it's a symptom. It's a symptom something's gone wrong. So if you get food poisoning, your body is going to eject it from your body, the food from your body, in an attempt to save you from dying of the food poisoning. Heat exhaustion, which we mentioned with the fever. You can vomit when you have that. Some people are very, very sensitive to motion, car sickness, seasickness, and it has to do with the inner ear. And for some reason that really disturbs them, their stomach, and they will throw up because of that. Stress. Somebody gets overstressed, they can throw up. Acid reflux, you usually see this in middle-aged people, very often middle-aged people that might be a little overweight. And during the night when they sleep, the acid in their stomach will come up into their mouth, and then it will choke them because the acid is very, very strong. Now, when you hear about cruises and they had to shut the cruise down because of norovirus, that's called gastroenteritis. And it's a virus that's very common, and it's why when you go on a cruise, don't touch the walls and don't touch the doorknobs if you can avoid it, because it's very contagious. But you'll get over it in 3 to 6 days. Now, when I was a kid, I always heard that horses can't vomit, and it's true, they cannot. And it's because of the mechanism of the valve at the bottom of their esophagus. If a horse vomits, that's a sign that something is catastrophically wrong with the body, with the internal organs of the body. Other animals that cannot vomit are rodents, rats, mice, squirrels, beavers. They can't throw up. And rabbits can't throw up. They simply don't have the mechanism for it. So next time, if you have to throw up, be glad that your body has that way of purging your body from food poisoning or any other kind of bacterial or viral damage that could be done to you. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Gorman, and if you have any vomiting questions, he'll be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller, for that very interesting subject. We do have a question. Is what do we do? What is the treatment? And the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta says if you have some fever and you're throwing up, the best thing to do is just for a couple of days, just ride it out. Drink a lot of liquids, especially some with electrolytes in it. And if you can eat food, eat something real simple like crackers, saltine crackers. And if the temperature gets above about 101.5, though, they do recommend that you go to the doctor. And after a couple of days, if you're still throwing up, you're still running a fever, not doing any better, then it's time to go to the doctor. And now we're going to hear from Mrs. Ramirez about hunger and thirst.
Hello, my name is Ms. Ramirez, and in this segment, we're going to be learning about hunger and thirst. So before we jump into our PowerPoint presentation, I just want to introduce you guys to one of our animal guests, and we're actually going to see her as she eats some of her favorite food. So as I bring her out, be thinking about what are some of your favorite foods. I know my favorite food are probably the sweets like cupcakes. But here's our animal guest. This is Pepper. She's the blue silky chicken, and they get that name because they have a blue patch of skin around their ears, and the name Silky because she is super soft, just like silk. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my iPad screen with you guys, and I'm going to throw some mealworm larvae on the table, and y'all are going to be able to watch her eat. So as you guys are watching her eat, think about what are some hormones do you think that might be involved in the feeling of being hungry or even the feeling of being full? And then also think about, for another science extension, what are some adaptations that are also helping Pepper the chicken eat her food? So let me get my iPad screen shared with you guys. And again, it might take me just a second to get my iPad linked. So while I'm waiting, you guys can just discuss some of your favorite foods and things you like to drink. We'll be talking about that in a second. So let me get my screen going. Okay, so I have my camera. So now I'm going to go ahead and get Pepper and put her on the table. And hopefully you guys can see that. So here's Pepper, and here's her food, her larva. So notice how she's using that beak of hers. Oh, she lost interest. She might be full, who knows? There she goes. So she is using that strong beak of hers to stab at that larva, those mealworms. So mealworms are larva forms of these little beetles that you guys are seeing around. And she will eat the beetles too. I think her favorite's the larva because it's not as hard. Those adults have a very hard exoskeleton. And she can actually eat quite a bit. She also eats fruits and veggies, so she's an omnivore. If she were outside, she would be scratching around using those long claws of hers to dig around or scratch, looking for insects and other things to eat. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share. So I'm going to stop this, and then we're going to come back. And so now I'm going to put her back in her little holding area. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to share my desktop screen, and now we're going to look at a quick little PowerPoint to understand the mechanisms between hunger and thirst. So let me start our screen share one more time, and then present our PowerPoint. Okay, so let's start with thirst first. So the thirst mechanism is controlled by the hypothalamus in the brain. So in this diagram, you can see where the hypothalamus is. And that hypothalamus detects changes in blood osmolality. So when there is an increase in dissolved particles in blood, that means the cells don't have enough water. And when your blood cells don't have enough water, this is what's stimulating the release of the antidiuretic hormone from the pituitary gland. And you can see where that is in this diagram here. And then once that happens, this will stimulate the release of the antidiuretic hormone, and that's also called ADH. And that ADH is also known as vasopressin. And this will signal the kidneys to reduce urine flow. So why do you think if there's not enough water, why would the body be trying to reduce urine flow? So the reason the body's trying to reduce urine flow is that so your fluids are conserved and more water can enter your bloodstream. The kidneys will then release angiotensin II in response to renin, and renin is an enzyme. Now that renin will promote the production of a protein, that angiotensin, and that angiotensin will constrict your blood vessels, and it causes your body to retain water. So those are some ways that your body can cope with a decreased amount of water in your body. Water will also be drawn out of your salivary glands in your mouth, and that is what causes your mouth to feel dry. So your body, again, is trying to find ways to conserve and keep that water. Now, if your pituitary gland is damaged or kidneys aren't able to respond to vasopressin and the body's unable to conserve those fluids, there is a condition, and that's called diabetes insipidus. And it's essentially creates excessive urination and an extreme uncontrollable thirst. So something interesting I learned was that before the creation of drugs to help control diabetes insipidus, some people with that condition were drinking up to 5 gallons of water a day because their body simply was not able to hold in and contain the amount of water that it needed. So that was something pretty interesting. So you might be wondering, well, why is water important to our body? So if we look at our next slide, we can tell that between 50 and 80% of the human body is actually made of water. And that water is super important for moistening our eyes, our nose, and our mouth. So sometimes if you have dry eyes, you might have to go to the store and buy kind of like that water lubrication to put in your eyes. Water is also very important for regulating our body temperature. It also absorbs lots of important nutrients that our body needs. It prevents constipation, which is always a plus. It lubricates your joints. It supports cell growth and reproduction, and it helps to transport not only nutrients, but oxygen to all parts of our body. And it flushes out waste products, and it protects organs and tissues. So water is very important to our health. And in the next little image, you just see, am I drinking enough water? So one of the ways that you can tell if you're hydrated is by simply looking at the color of your urine. So if you can look at the color chart and maybe see where you fall and what your hydration levels might be. But if you're not getting enough water, you could fall symptom to dehydration. And some symptoms of dehydration would be obviously thirst, because again, your mouth is going to be super dry. Also, you're probably going to be urinating less. You might feel dry skin, headaches, and even rapid heartbeat. So it is very important that we get enough water. And according to the Mayo Clinic, it's recommended that women get between about 11 cups of water a day and men about 15 cups of water a day, give or take. But that's the recommended amount. So dehydration just occurs when there is an insufficient water amount in your blood plasma. And that's going to reflect, if you go to the hospital, the way that they detect whether you're dehydrated is they simply run a blood panel. And they'll be able to tell you what your blood plasma osmolality is. And that will tell them your hydration levels. And we lose water in a variety of ways. So one of the most common ways is when you work out, you sweat a lot, and that's why you might feel more thirsty and feel the need to drink. So water leaves the body when we exhale air, when we sweat, and when we urinate. And all of that water, it's ultimately coming from our blood plasma. So whenever we lose water, we're affecting our blood plasma. And then our next thing that we're going to talk about, now that's thirst. Our next thing we're going to talk about is hunger. And hunger, what we have is called so the sight or smell of food can trigger hunger, and just so can imagining it. So imagine all those TV advertisements and commercials you see on TV, and it just makes you feel hungry when you see some of those foods. But also your internal body clock can trigger hunger as well. So sometimes you might automatically feel hungry at noon, even if you aren't hungry, but because you might typically eat at that time, your body might be saying, hey, it's time to eat. So that's just something to be aware of. So what ends up happening is the vagus nerve will send signals to your brain about how full or empty your stomach is. And then also it will send information about the different nutrients that are present in your intestines. So when your stomach has been empty for about 2 hours, it begins to contract and it will sweep remaining food into the intestines. When that contraction happens, it causes that rumbling sound that you might hear in your stomach. And that scientific name for that rumbling is borborygmus. So that was a new word I learned. So that's borborygmus, and that's just the stomach rumbling. And the reason your stomach is rumbling is because you have food, you have gases that are traveling through your intestines when your intestines and stomach are contracting. So then once that contraction starts to happen, cells in the stomach and your intestine will produce a hormone called ghrelin. That hormone is what triggers your feeling of hunger. So that hormone is your appetite stimulator. And it's important to note that your levels of ghrelin are affected by a variety of different factors, including sleep deprivation and stress. So that's how come if you're not getting enough sleep and you're fatigued, or if you're super stressed out, some people will stress eat. So I know, especially during the pandemic, when we were working from home, I was definitely stress eating. I was finding myself eating a lot, probably out of boredom too. But those are some other factors that can affect your hunger. And then those levels of key nutrients in your blood, including glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids, are at their lowest concentrations when you're hungry. So sometimes you might hear that word hangry. There's actually a scientific process as to why you're feeling angry when you're hungry. And that's just because your body is low on key nutrients. And so it's easy to agitate you. And so other reasons why people eat, again, we said that eating can become automatic or timed. So, you wake up every morning and you have breakfast at 7. So even though you might not be hungry, your body's on a biological time clock and it's just used to eating at that time. Also gratification and reward. So sometimes food just tastes good and it makes you feel happy, so you eat it. So we can also call that as being gluttonous. Also stress eating, which I mentioned earlier, might have affected us during the pandemic with our stress eating. So when you're stressed, your cortisol levels are increased, and that also increases your hunger. Also, as I mentioned, fatigue, when you're tired, you will also eat more, but also peer pressure. So I found this interesting. So think about when you're having like an office party or a party with your friends, you see everybody eating, so you feel like you have to eat too and enjoy all those wonderful foods. So those are some other things that affect your appetite. So it's that hormone ghrelin and then other psychological factors as well. So if we talk about the appetite stimulator, there also has to be something on the opposite end that suppresses it, and that is leptin. So leptin is the appetite suppressor. So theoretically, if you're full, your feeling of fullness is because of that leptin. And leptin is stored and secreted by fat cells, and it's considered to be the master regulator of hunger. So when you eat a meal, leptin is released from fat cells, and it sends a signal to your brain to let you know that you are full and to stop eating. Now, many people who are obese or overweight, their body may no longer properly respond to that leptin signal. And so sometimes we might just keep eating. But those are some two important hormones that help to regulate hunger. And then we also mentioned that hangry. So this is just a little infographic that explains the science behind being hangry. And it mostly has to deal with when you're hungry and there's not enough food in your body, you're not getting those nutrients. So your glucose levels are going to be affected. So glucose levels will start to drop, and the brain is critically dependent on glucose. So if your blood glucose levels drop so far enough, the brain starts to perceive it as life-threatening, and those lower blood glucose levels make it harder for you guys to concentrate or do simple tasks. So hence, that's why we might feel hangry when we haven't had something to eat. And I know that definitely affects me too. So the next thing we're gonna do, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I just have a super quick little video of some animal friends eating. So these are my two rabbits. This is Bella and Stuart. They're eating some corn. They're typically pretty good at regulating themselves. If they're not hungry, they'll just leave the food there. But they enjoy eating different fruits and vegetables. They are omnivores. They are domesticated pet rabbits. This is them again eating their salad mix. Fast forward a little bit. These are our box turtles that we have in our Habitat Museum here at the EEC. They're also omnivores. That's a blue-tongued skink eating some cat food. So he's an omnivore as well. And they get that name blue-tongued skink because they have a blue tongue. This is our resident kitty cat, Stripey. So she lives here at our facility. And something about her, she knows when we come. So in the morning, she will run up to us and she just expects to get food every morning. So that might be more of her body saying it's time to eat because it's a certain time. This is my chicken Pepper that you guys saw earlier. She is drinking water. So think about the thirst mechanism involved there. And I didn't realize how hard it was to film an animal drinking. It's so easy to find them eating food, but I can't really make an animal drink water if they're not thirsty. So I didn't realize how hard that was going to be to find an animal that was actually drinking. And then in our next one, these are some other chickens that we have at the EEC. They're scratching and looking around for other food. So they must be hungry. They're looking for insects and other things to eat. These are our ducks that are dabbling in a puddle of water in the parking lot. So they're drinking water too, but they're also filter feeding, looking for little things to eat inside the puddle. This is our goat Jabez. I had food in my hand. I had some sweet food in my hand, but he did not want to eat it. He was super picky. I think he wanted some nice green leaves to eat, and I just didn't have any. And these are my two dogs. I probably shouldn't be giving them vanilla ice cream, but that's their favorite treat. The black one, Toby, actually has eating problems, and he has to eat out of a special bowl because he is gluttonous. He overeats, and I have to regulate how much food he gets. Because if there's any food in front of him, he will automatically eat it. So he's on a special diet and he eats out of a special bowl, a slow feeder bowl to help him with his eating habits. So I'm going to stop my screen share. We're going to give it back to Dr. Gorman and he's going to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. We learned a lot about that. And the question is, how do you know if you're hungry or thirsty? And the brain, same part of the brain tells your body whether you're hungry or thirsty. So your body may be getting mixed messages. So what they recommend is you just prevent it in the first place. Eat 3 good full meals, balanced meals a day, 3 to 4 hours apart. Drink plenty of water. And in between, if you think you're thirsty or you think you're hungry in between your meals, good idea is just to drink a good glass of cold water. That will probably solve your problems. Thank you. And now we're going to hear from Mr. Broughton about fatigue and pain.
Thank you, Dr. Gorman. Let me share my screen here so we can get started with the presentation. So my part is about fatigue and pain, and I chose that picture for this first slide because it highlights a number of body systems. In people and animals, the sensory organs, nervous systems, and hormones released by the endocrine system all play a role in sensing and responding to internal and external stimuli, as can the musculoskeletal system in response, if the response involves movement. So if you feel fatigue or pain, you've got a number of body systems that are going to work together to help you respond to fatigue or pain. And a question that I was kind of thinking of is, do plants experience fatigue and pain? And that's something I'm going to let you research for yourself, but they do respond to stimuli. We saw Ms. Nash show how the plants wilt, which is an internal stimuli, but we're going to mainly focus on people and animals for this section. So we're going to start off with fatigue, and one type of fatigue is physical fatigue, and that is if you feel tired or exhausted, and it just comes from physical exertion. So when a person engages in physical activity, the body becomes more active. And going back to even just the cellular level, more oxygen and food energy are required by cells for ATP production. ATP is generated, the metabolic process increase and thermal energy of the body increase. Energy is released as heat, but the body does increase in temperature due to increased thermal energy. That causes an imbalance that needs to be addressed by the body. So to avoid a dangerous increase in body temperature, the skin produces sweat, which helps lower the body temperature through evaporation. The heart also pumps harder and faster to provide enough oxygenated blood for active muscles. The respiratory system is stimulated more intensely by changes in the concentration of carbon dioxide and oxygen in the blood, which causes an increase in breathing rate and volume of each breath. So if you do some exercise, which you should do every day, you want to get your heart pumping and get your circulatory system and respiratory system working, but you want to be at an optimal level. It's good to exercise, but you don't want to work out too hard because then you could overdo it. So you can see some symptoms there of physical fatigue. If you feel tired, weak, have sore, aching muscles, if you're thirsty, sweating, have a headache or dizzy, if your reflexes are getting slow or impaired decision making can happen, you probably are experiencing physical fatigue. So what could you do about that? One thing is drink plenty of water. It is important to drink water because your body's going to sweat and lose water, and you got to put it back in. So drinking plenty of water, eating healthy foods. If you try to work out after eating McDonald's, it's not going to go as well as versus if you would have eaten some vegetables. But get regular exercise. If you exercise for the first time after not having exercised for a long time, you'll find you get tired very fast. That is because you don't have very good stamina. But if you exercise every day, you'll find that you can do more exercise at a higher rate for a longer time. And that means you have increased stamina. You also want to get enough sleep, do some relaxing activities that can help you get, it's the same as getting rest, but it's not sleep, but just getting some rest. Definitely do not smoke. Set goals for physical fitness, short-term goals and long-term goals. And when you accomplish those goals, celebrate your accomplishments. And if you do that, I think you're going to find that you are living a healthy lifestyle as far as physical fatigue goes. So with fatigue, a synonym for that is exhaustion, and something that we have to be very aware of out here at our center is heat exhaustion and heat stroke. It could get very hot during the summer in Texas, as you know, and if you spend a lot of time outdoors doing physical work, even just walking, you can experience heat exhaustion. So signs of that are if you feel faint or dizzy, excessive sweating, but then your skin feels kind of cool or pale or clammy. If you start to feel nauseous or vomit, you have a rapid but weak pulse and muscle cramps, you probably are experiencing heat exhaustion. And so you need to get to a cool, air conditioning place, drink water, and then when you get a chance at home, take a cool shower or use or we have cold packs out here that we can give people who experience heat exhaustion, because it does happen every single year. A student or teacher gets too hot and they experience heat exhaustion. And what's even worse than that is heat stroke. So that involves a throbbing headache. You stop sweating because your body is kind of starting to almost shut down. If your body temperature rises above 103 degrees, that is very dangerous. Your skin gets red, hot and dry, which is, I mean, sunburn can happen without heat stroke happening, but probably both are happening there. Still continue with nausea and vomiting, rapid, strong pulse. So your body is trying to correct the heat stroke, but it just can't. And you might even faint or pass out. If that happens, call 911 and take someone to the hospital, because heat stroke can be deadly. And I've seen a person go from being fine to experience heat exhaustion and then heat stroke within hours. It can happen quickly if you are out in a very hot weather doing physical work. So it can be a dangerous thing, and it's something we have to be very aware of out here. And what you can do to prevent that is drinking water. So Texas Parks and Wildlife recommends drinking at least 16 ounces of water every hour to prevent against dehydration. And if you have pets, don't forget them, because they need water too. A pet can experience heat exhaustion or even heat stroke if it gets too hot. So you've got to drink a lot of water. I actually start drinking water even the night before if I know I'm going to be outside all day, so that I wake up hydrated. And then as soon as I wake up, I try to drink like 2 big glasses of water, and then a glass or a bottle of water every hour. And if I do that, even if it's super hot, and even if I'm doing a lot of physical work outside, if I'm drinking water, I'm usually okay. About the only other thing I do is put a hat on to keep the sun off your head, because you don't want to get sunburned. But if I don't do that, I will become dehydrated. I will get heat exhaustion, and it's just, I mean, it's what you can't help it if you're outside in that kind of heat. So during the summer especially. Be aware of that. Now, another kind of fatigue is mental fatigue. So you can see in that picture there, there's all kinds of things that people worry about, school or work or what you see on the news, people, arguing. You can see there's the hot dog in there. I think that's a hot dog and a candy bar because people do stress eat, like Mr. Ramirez mentioned. There's all kinds of things people worry about. And so some symptoms of mental fatigue are if you feel stressed, anxious, low emotional resilience. That means like something that is not even a big deal causes you to break down mentally, and it shouldn't, but you're already fatigued. So that it's like they say the straw that breaks the camel's back, the one last thing that causes you to break down. You're irritable. Sometimes you have a feeling of helplessness. You feel overwhelmed. And starting to shut down mentally. You have low motivation. People can feel depressed. It's difficult to sleep, and you're distracted. Those are all symptoms of mental fatigue, and it's something we all go through. But there's ways to deal with it. So here's what you can do about mental fatigue. If you can eliminate stressors, there's things in your life that you don't have to have. If you can eliminate stressors, that will help you out mentally. And just take a break. It's okay to take breaks. You don't have to keep going and going. Taking a break is perfectly fine. Getting exercise actually helps your physical fatigue, but also your mental fatigue, because when you exercise, that releases natural endorphins into your body. Endorphins will make you feel good. They make you feel happy. And so if you're feeling down mentally, exercising can actually help increase your awareness and feelings of happiness. Practice relaxation techniques. So that to me goes along with taking a break. Sometimes if I'm feeling stressed out, I just take a break and relax and think about something else for a while. Give my mind a chance to kind of reset, and I feel better, and I can go back to what I was doing before. Get more sleep. It's important to get at least 8 hours of sleep every night. So at least 8 too. So if you can get more, that's even better. Keep a gratitude journal. If there's things that stress you in your life, but there are good things in your life too. So always kind of keep those in mind. That helps fend off mental fatigue. Ask for help. Sometimes people don't like to ask for help because they want to feel independent, but there are people in your life that can help you. Parents, school staff, lots of other people around to help you do things and help you get through a difficult situation so you're not so mentally fatigued. You can join a support group, and that is even, your friends could be your support group, but just make sure you are choosing good friends. Balance your work and leisure. That goes for young people and old people as well. Students overwork themselves with school sometimes. Teachers overwork themselves with their work sometimes, but it's important to balance work and your home life or your leisure, and then learn to say no and understand peer pressure, and that it is okay to say no to things. You don't always have to try to please everybody. And that picture there too, one thing that I do when I'm feeling mentally stressed out is get a pet and go visit your pet, and that usually makes people feel happier. There's actual research that shows people who have pets are more mentally happy than people who don't. So if you can get a pet or go visit a pet, that can help you as well. So we've covered fatigue. One thing that I like to do for exercise is get outside and take a walk on our trails, be in nature. There's a lot of research that shows just being in nature helps you de-stress. So I'm going to play a video here. It's about 2 minutes long of our trails back to our lake. And hopefully that will help you relax for just about a couple minutes here. All right, so that helped me relax. I wasn't entirely sure that video was going to play, so I had two backup videos, but they did play, so I'm going to skip to the slide on pain. Pain can be classified into two types of pain: acute pain and chronic pain. Acute is it happens quickly and doesn't last very long. It can be very severe or minor. Chronic pain is ongoing pain that lasts longer than 6 months, and it can also be very severe or not so severe. Just depends on what kind. But chronic pain is what I'm going to focus on more because it's usually associated with internal stimuli. And there's just some facts on chronic pain. It is something a lot of people experience. I think the slide before that said 1 in 5, and this is more than 1/3. So probably sometime in your life you're going to experience chronic pain, and you've got to find ways to deal with that. So here is what you can do about pain. First of all, tell your parents. You may need to see a doctor or some type of professional. They may prescribe some medicine or tell you to get over-the-counter medicine, but don't just self-medicate. Listen to your doctor and follow your doctor's directions on that. You may need physical therapy, so that can be hot or cold packs, massages, but also exercise, and that again releases those natural endorphins. There's support groups for pain as well, and then cognitive behavior therapy is just positive thinking. Sometimes if you are in pain, it can be easy to get negative about things, but you've got to think positively. That actually helps you recover more quickly. And one thing I think I forgot to put in here is don't smoke. If you are injured and smoke, it will take you longer to recover than if you don't smoke. So definitely don't do that. And then we have all kinds of animals out here. And so we have to monitor them to see if they're in pain. And you just really look at them. You know how if you have a pet, how it normally acts, but if they seem agitated or cry out or yelp or growl or do any of those things that are on that list, they're probably in some pain, and you're going to need to keep a close eye on them and be aware of that. Maybe you need to take them to the vet if it lasts, because the vet can help them heal. So that is my part for fatigue and pain. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Gorman, and have a great rest of your day. Well, I'll close it out. Or no, I think he's got it.
Thank you. If our program today was maintaining balance in response to internal stimuli. During this virtual field trip, students discovered that living organisms must be able to maintain balance and stable internal conditions in response to internal stimuli. Students investigated responses in organisms that may result from internal stimuli. Ms. Nash talked about wilting in plants. Ms. Fuller talked about fever and vomiting. Ms. Ramirez covered hunger and thirst. Mr. Broughton talked to you about fatigue and pain. Thank you. How did we do? Please respond by going to www.tiny.cc/EEC feedback. Fill out a short form to let us know how we did. Thank you. You have a great rest of the year and life.